and welcome to Weather HQ. I'm Paolo del Rosario. This week, we've taken a closer look at several key issues, from the latest reports on malaria cases in the country to the health risks caused by the recent haze in Quezon City and Rizal. Now, how exactly does hot weather affect blood pressure? Well, we'll answer that later on as well. To give us a better understanding of the malaria situation in the Philippines and what's being done to address it, I spoke with Dr. Ronjin Solante, the chair of the Adult Infectious Diseases and Tropical Medicine Department at San Lazaro Hospital.
Before 2000, the year 2000, Philippines was really one of the hotspots of malaria in Southeast Asia. And because of a very good malarial control, especially in the Department of Health, we were able to really lessen the provinces that, ang goal kasi natin doon yung provinces that is malaria-free, no?
Mm-hmm.
And the latest count now as of 2023, no, ito yung pinaka-latest natin, only Palawan and certain areas of Palawan that is reporting malaria. Ibig sabihin, isa na lang, no? So wala na yung ibang mga provinces. So from the original of most provinces, more than 70% of the provinces reporting malaria in the Philippines, ang Palawan na lang, at I think there are only 3 municipalities now in Palawan that is also reporting cases of malaria. So that's a big progress for us, and we don't consider malaria anymore a big threat in the Philippines.
Doc, balikan muna natin yung year 2000s or around that area. You mentioned po that dati talaga isa tayo sa mga hotspots ng malaria. Ano pong ginawa ng DOH in particular to be able to curb its spread and to almost be malaria-free?
Well, ang malaria kasi it's transmitted by the mosquito, no, carrying the microorganism. And there are areas in the Philippines talagang malawak yung larval transmission dahil nga tropical country, na malaking bagay yung mga environment na kung saan man namumugad itong mga lamok na to, especially in the countryside, and usually mahirap siyang i-control. But because of the efforts of the government to really clean up those environment, no, may mga tinatawag tayong larvicidal program na yung mga pinupugaran ng mga lamok sa mga provinces, talagang iniisa-isa yan yung mga tinutukoy na mga area ng mga hotspots ng malaria. And then at the same time, malaking bagay din ang yung mga prophylaxis na binibigay natin doon sa mga areas na to also stop the transmission, especially if you're traveling to those areas, no? Mm-hmm. So it's more on larval control, yung mga mosquito, in terms of by controlling the environment, cleaning the environment, and at the same time, aggressive clinical management. Pag nagka-malaria ka, dapat tinutukoy kung saan ka nanggaling, at the same time, tinitrace yun kung sino pa yung mga areas na merong mga nag-report na malaria.
Doc, I want to connect this with what we're seeing also with the dengue cases in the country, because based on, well, kung saan po sila galing, which is the larva, which is mosquitoes, and it also requires a certain level of larvicidal control. Is that something that we can apply also to the way that we fight dengue, considering po that nagkaroon ng konting spike yung dengue cases earlier in the year?
Yes, malaking bagay talaga ang vector control, no? Ang tawag namin yan vector control, kasi yung nagdadala ng mikrobyo nito ay yung mga mosquito na talagang they infect and bite anyone who is exposed to this type of mosquito. Medyo lang siguro characteristic ng mga mosquito ng malaria at saka yung dengue, because most of the mosquito sa dengue are usually thrive in the highly urbanized area. Mm-hmm. But in the malaria, in the Aedes albopictus is usually in areas na malapit sa mga beaches, sa mga yung may mga watershed, no? Na hindi highly urbanized, mga mountainous areas talaga itong mga sa malaria. Kaya it's so difficult also to control. Kaya ang mga nangyayari niyan, when you do some vector control in this area, talagang pupuntahan mo yung mga mapunong lugar, hindi masyadong mataong lugar, and that also high risk din ang gumagawa niyan because you're also at risk of other environmental hazard, no? But for dengue, ang problema sa dengue is mga basura, highly urbanized, ang mga lamok nandito lang sa kapaligiran natin, and more or less mas marami ang lamok ng dengue carrying the dengue virus, and I think compared to those carrying the malaria.
Doc, kapag tinignan natin yung climate change in particular, yung climate change really affecting the way the growth of a certain larva, we've seen the dengue spike partly due to the climate change as well. Is that something that we need to be wary about, especially when we talk about malaria? Na-mention mo nga po that when you talk about watersheds, when you talk about the not as urbanized areas in particular, that could change or affect the growth of larvae in certain areas. Palagay niyo po ba that climate change is going to be something that we have to be wary of in terms of keeping malaria down dito sa Pilipinas?
Yes, Paolo, no, malaking bagay talaga ang climate change, no, because for one, with climate change, there is an erratic, longer season. Meron ding longer na hot season, especially in the Philippines. And itong climate change na to has also make this itong mga vector like mga lamok, they also nag-change din yung behavior nila, no? And in fact, that there are data now na yung pag-change ng climate natin has somehow increased the lifespan of some of these mosquitoes, especially for the dengue, malaria, mosquito carrying the malaria, no? Tumataas yung lifespan nila, mas marami silang time to really produce more mosquito, no? And at the same time, when you have more mosquito, then you have higher risk also of this mosquito carrying the infection. And that's why isa yan sa mga factor bakit may mga ibang bansa are not reporting malaria or not reporting dengue, are already reporting these mga common tropical infections that are not so common in some European or even in the US.
Doc Jean, mag-focus muna tayo sa Palawan. You mentioned po that that's the only province right now with a couple of municipalities that has cases of malaria, or at least hindi po siya zero malaria. What are the challenges there in particular na medyo nahihirapan tayo in terms of making it a zero malaria area?
Well, siguro ang challenges natin dito is really how the local government will really follow the measures, no, in terms of the countermeasures to decrease yung mga areas kung saan namumugad ang mga lamok carrying the malaria, no. Alam naman natin in areas like Palawan, no, it's a very very big province, and when you look at the demographic, the geographic situation there, it's complex also because maraming bukid, maraming iba't ibang terrain, and sometimes it's so difficult to implement this mga environmental control, especially in areas na tatawirin pa ng bundok, tatawirin mo ng ilog na marami. So something like that ang medyo challenge sa local government.
Doc, for those wondering, let's have more information on malaria itself here. Gawin natin tong information drive, Doc. What should you be worried about from a household perspective, especially po yung mga nasa mga more remote areas, or for those going out on vacation in more remote areas? What are the things that they could do to be able to potentially avoid any malaria cases? And of course, what should they watch out for?
Okay, very important, Paolo, no? They need to coordinate with the local government in Palawan kung ano yung mga municipality that is still reporting malaria, no? Like for example, if you go to Palawan, what specific municipality are you going there? Because if the local health government will tell you this area has still malaria reported cases and this area, then they have to take what we call prophylaxis before going there, no? Kasi importante yung prophylaxis na yan to prevent getting the infection. And at the same time, when you know that these areas are also the ones reporting with malaria, siguro you have to evade those areas and then have yourself protected by wearing clothing that can protect your skin and less of being exposed to the mosquito. Now, the most important part here is that when you develop symptoms of malaria, the most common symptoms of malaria is still fever and headache. And when you are in an area, coming from that area na merong mga malaria case, then you have to report to the doctor na, ay, nanggaling po ako sa ganitong province, para lang at least malaman ng mga doktor na there's a possibility that aside from other infections, malaria should also be investigated.
Doc, ano po yung mga challenges in treating malaria, especially once it's identified? Because I can only imagine there is a reason why napaka-comprehensive, napaka-agresibo po natin in terms of our information drives and in terms of our attack to curb the number of malaria cases dito sa Pilipinas.
Yes, ang pinaka-challenge talaga when you will be infected with the malaria that is drug resistant, no? Meron tayong tinatawag na chloroquine resistant type of Plasmodium falciparum, no? And when you have this drug resistant falciparum, yung first line ng mga gamot hindi na tumatalab. And that's why our recent recommendation, our current recommendation now is to use the second line, which is the artemether based type of treatment, which can be effective against this resistant Plasmodium falciparum, no? That's one. The other one is also diagnostics. Alam naman natin na the capability of doing madali lang, mabilis i-diagnose ang malaria, Paolo, no? You just get a blood smear, yung dugo, tapos ilagay mo siya sa isang glass, then you will look at it in the microscope. But again, it takes also timing when you get the blood, because it's important that when you get the blood during the time na naglalagnat yung pasyente, and sometimes you cannot just get the positive during the first exam. You have to really repeat 2 or 3 times para lang makuha or makita mo yung mikrobyo. Now, in the event na talagang highly suspicious na malaria ka, tapos negative ka nung first test, there's also another test that will be done para lang at least makuha mo yung positivity na yung pasyente talagang merong malaria or wala.
Doc, may incubation period po ba yung malaria?
Yes, just like any other infection, pag kinakagat ka ng lamok na carrying the malarial parasite, no, usually it takes around 7 to 10 days before the appearance of the first symptom. So ibig sabihin, pag nakagat ka ngayon, magbilang ka ng 7 to 10 days. Kung infected yung lamok na yun, the first symptom is usually fever, then followed by headache. Ang delikado lang sa malaria, Paolo, no, pag hindi mo maagapan, it can really cause more severe form of infection. The two most important complications of malaria is when it goes to the brain, and the other one is when it affects also the kidney or yung bato natin, that can also lead to renal failure and death.
Coming up, after the break, we'll take a look into the health hazards brought on by the Haze in Quezon City and Rizal, the safety measures you should follow, and how authorities are responding. Don't go away. Weather HQ will be right back. Welcome back. You're still watching Weather HQ. This is Paolo del Rosario. The Department of Health has issued an advisory encouraging the public to regularly monitor the air quality index. Stay indoors as much as possible and wear face masks to reduce harmful exposure to particulates, especially for those with respiratory issues. To help us understand the associated health risks and the safety guidelines, and as well as how the government is responding, here's my conversation with DOH Assistant Secretary and Spokesperson, Dr. Albert Domingo.
Haze is interchangeably used informally with smog sometimes, no? Tapos pag tinatagalog natin, that's even tougher to translate. The catch-all term is usok.
Yeah.
Although in English, usok is smoke. Now, what's important across all the terms, in particular sa haze, is yung particulate matter. That's what we released yesterday. We explained that particulate matter, or PM as it's called, has 2 sizes of concern. Yung 10 micrometers and yung 2.5 micrometers. Whatever this is, whether you call it haze, smog, or usok, it's important that we avoid suspended particulate matter in the air because it can, 1, irritate our nose, our sinuses, and our throat for the PM10. And 2, for the PM2.5, it's even worse, Paolo. Pwede siyang pumasok deep into the lungs, and in some cases, it can cross over into the bloodstream and can even lead to cardiovascular diseases over time.
Doc, the DOH has advised the public to monitor the air quality index. Again, for those who need to access it or for those who want to access it, where can they see the real-time air quality data?
So there are two ways to access it. Number one would be officially, the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, particularly the Environment Management Bureau, has a website. So the main website is denr.gov.ph. Then please search for EMB or the Environment Management Bureau. But another way, a bit more convenient, is to download your favorite weather app. Whatever the weather app is, as long as it's getting data on the Philippines, chances are there is a section that says air quality index. And then there will be the green, I think that's healthy or fair. And then if it gets worse, it says unhealthy, severely unhealthy. The worst would be emergency. So importante yun, Paolo, kasi it's like the heat index, di ba? Nowadays, it's summer, so we check on the heat index. We will know what to wear, what time to avoid the sun. With the air quality index, we know what areas to avoid if possible, or if we can't avoid the area, if we should bring a mask or not.
Mm-hmm. Doc, when you mentioned PM10, PM2.5, the particulates, and of course yung health effects niya, or at least the adverse health effects, how much more dangers are they for yung mga vulnerable groups po natin, especially the senior citizens and of course children?
Right. Your sensitive populations, as we call them, or vulnerable groups, would include, you're correct, the senior citizens, the children. But in this particular case, Paolo, because we're talking of respiratory illnesses, those with bronchial asthma, yung mga may hika, those with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, emphysema, usually sa mga mas matanda yung COPD tsaka emphysema, ito yung mga delikado because to the general public without these diseases, for example, if the air quality index says poor, baka kaya pang itolerate ng general public. Pero dun sa mga sensitive, pag poor, nagsisimula na yung mga asthma attacks, nagsisimula na. And how does an asthma attack feel like? I say this from experience because I'm also an asthmatic. You actually feel like you're drowning. Parang hindi ka makahinga kasi ang higpit ng baga mo. So yun yung pwede mangyari if you are part of the sensitive population in an area where the air quality index is poor or worse.
Doc, one of the advisories had was the use of face masks yet again. Of course, schools are there's still some schools there that are still having classes. What advice is normally given out to those going to schools at the moment, and of course, even those going to work in general?
So the challenge with face masks is, since you mentioned the school, age is also a factor in the proper use of face masks. Remember, during the pandemic, it was difficult to make a judgment call whether to require 5 years old and below to wear masks because children don't, particularly 5 and below, they don't clearly understand what the use of a face mask is, or they can't tolerate having a face mask, no matter how small or how fit it is on their face. So maybe let's talk about the older children. The school, if air-conditioned, will probably have a better chance because your air cons have filters. But if you don't have air cons, you can still ask kids 5 and up to wear face masks. But in this case, dapat N95. And I'll go now to the office age, no? Ganun rin. If you're in the office, chances are the office is air-conditioned, malinis naman yung hangin. Pero kung hindi siya, and you're in an area na talagang bad yung air quality index, kailangan naka N95 face mask kasi yung particulate matter yung iniiwasan natin.
Mm-hmm. ASEC, of course, all of these advisories did come because of the sudden haze that did happen in Quezon City and Rizal in particular. Is it advisable to actually have N95 masks still within reach, especially for those commuting, just in case, considering the air quality being experienced currently at the moment?
So some practical advice, if you belong to the sensitive population, meaning you do have the diseases mentioned, asthma, COPD, emphysema, it may be good to have an N95 mask with you. If you are going to an area where the air quality index is poor or worse, wala kang magagawa, you have to go there, so bring an N95 mask with you. Pag tayo naman, general public, wala naman tayo ng ganung conditions or hindi naman tayo vulnerable population, kahit yung mga cloth masks, they still help. And even yung mga medical masks are also allowable. So the N95, don't go out there. No, everyone who's listening and watching, this is not like a situation na let's go to the nearest drugstore and buy an N95. No, no, no. It's only for sensitive population. Kasi ina-anticipate ko na, Paolo, baka mamaya mag-panic buying. No, hindi po. Yung sensitive populations lang yung magbe-benefit from the N95.
Doc, any last piece of advice before we let you go?
At the end of the day, Paolo, this is all a matter of even the upstream. Meaning when I say upstream, where does the particulate matter come from? So we think of the smoke emissions from cars, yung mga smoke belcher. We think about the industries, the factories. We think about even yung mga nagsusunog pa. Narinig ko kanina off-air, sabi ni Monique, what is siga? Diba? Siga is burning.
Oh my God, I got exposed, Doc!
O, diba? Well, bawal nang magsiga actually kasi meron ng Clean Air Act. So hindi na tayo dapat nagaganon. So again, it's a concerted effort. Hindi tayo dapat nagre-react lang kapag nagkakaroon ng haze kasi medyo advanced na yung haze. Let's prevent air pollution so that we don't have to talk about wearing masks or panicking because of these situations.
Up next, we'll explore if there is an ideal BP for outdoor workers. Can the heat trigger a hypertensive crisis? And what can you do to stay safe this summer? We'll share our interview with Dr. Glenn Sayat, adult cardiologist, when we return. Stay with us. Welcome back to Weather HQ. I'm Paolo del Rosario. The summer heat isn't just uncomfortable. It could be putting your heart at risk. Now, for people with high blood pressure, working or staying out in extreme heat can lead to serious health issues. But how exactly does hot weather affect your blood pressure? Is there a safe range to watch out for, and what precautions should you be taking? To break it all down, here's my interview with Dr. Glenn Sayat, adult cardiologist and echocardiographer from Mary Mediatrix Medical Center.
So hot weather typically causes our blood pressure to go down because heat causes our blood vessels to dilate, so a process called vasodilation, which helps our body to release the heat. So this can lead to a drop in blood pressure, especially if the person is dehydrated or is overexerted. So it can vary depending on a person's baseline health and kung ano yung mga medications na tinitake niya.
Mm-hmm. Is there an ideal or safe BP for those working outdoors during yung extreme heat na to? There are some people na talagang hindi maiiwasan na nasa ilalim talaga ng araw. When you talk about their BP, what's a good range for them or what is safe? Is it different from what we normally have during normal temperatures?
So there's no specific blood pressure, no, for these people, but that general target remains to be below 120/80 for healthy individuals.
Yeah.
For people with hypertension, so a safe working BP is one that remains within their normal control range, so typically less than 130/80. So without symptoms, of course, like dizziness, fatigue, or confusion.
Are those the typical symptoms for those, especially, like, let's say, nasabi mo nga that with the higher heat, mababa yung BP po natin. Are those the symptoms that normally indicate na mababa yung BP natin?
So symptoms like dizziness, fainting, blurred vision or weakness, those are typical symptoms of too low BP. While too high BP, so they usually present with headaches, chest discomfort, shortness of breath, or palpitation. So for people who are at risk, it's safe that they carry with them their portable BP monitors to check in real time if they feel unwell.
How vulnerable are yung mga hypertensive individuals, especially during this high heat era that we have at the moment?
Yung mga hypertensive individuals, they are vulnerable, no? So people with hypertension, especially those who are taking the following medications, yung nagtitake ng diuretics, beta blockers, they have the impaired heat regulation and they are more susceptible to dehydration and heat exhaustion. So their cardiovascular system may not respond efficiently to maintain the temperature balance under stress.
You mentioned heat exhaustion. Can you talk more about what heat exhaustion actually is, and heat stroke, of course, especially when it relates to yung mga highly vulnerable population po natin?
So, itong mga taong to, no, nagkakameron ng heat stroke and heat exhaustion, no, usually nahihilo sila, nagko-collapse, no, tapos nagkakameron ng excessive sweating, confusion, no. So yung mga taong to usually nagkakameron ng pagbaba ng BP, no, dahil yung cardiovascular system nila is under stress and they are not able to cope up, no.
Let's focus again on yung mga tao na hypertensive. We talked about, minsan talaga minamanage talaga eh. Like you mentioned the medication that some of them do take to manage yung hypertension po nila. But then, can heat actually trigger yung mga hypertensive crisis that syempre iniiwasan ng mga tao despite being well managed, medically speaking?
Yes, it's possible, especially if their hydration is poor. No, if medications are skipped or if the person experiences sudden stress or overexertion. So while heat usually lowers BP, the body's stress response to overheating or dehydration can paradoxically cause blood pressure spikes. No? So pag nagtatry yung katawan natin na i-release yung heat, so bibilis din yung tibok ng puso. No? So tumataas yung cardiac output, and then yun nangyayari yung mga blood pressure spikes, no, in some individuals.
Alam mo, minsan hindi talaga maiiwasan yung, well, being exposed to the sun, being exposed to this heat, especially from sa mga kababayan natin in the northern provinces in particular. When you take a look at what they can do to properly regulate themselves, especially kung hindi nila maiiwasan na magtatrabaho sila under the sun, what would you say to help them regulate yung BP nila or in general, yung general health nila under these extreme heat conditions?
I would advise them to follow the 3 C's, no, for staying safe in the heat. So first is cool down, second is consume fluids, and the third is check for their symptoms. No, so for cooling down, no, they must stay in a colder room. No, so avoid specific peak sun hours, and yung damit nila dapat breathable yun, no. Then yung fluids, no, hydration, and then yung checking for symptoms, no, they must monitor kung nakakameron ba sila ng dizziness, fatigue, nausea, chest discomfort. So yun yung mga signal na nagkakameron na ng BP fluctuations or heat exhaustion.
You mentioned yung hydration. I want to talk a bit more about that kasi minsan akala ng mga tao, okay, magja-juice sila, pwede na yan. O minsan yung mga energy drinks just to stay hydrated. Is there a proper way to be hydrated, to stay hydrated during this time in particular?
Well, yung pag maramdaman nila na uhaw sila, no, mas maganda meron sila palaging dalang tubig, especially with the kind of weather that we have now. So, pero meron ding mga tao kasi na pinaglilimit ng tubig, yung may mga heart failure, no? So, they must follow their doctor on the advice, no?
And of course, when we take a look at what people siguro don't really pay as much attention to, you as a doctor po, when you take a look at yung mga pasyente po ninyo, what do you find yourself advising them to do more of na nagulat ka? Maybe they do not pay as much attention to, especially during this time na medyo talaga mainit talaga.
Siyempre yung hydration talaga, no, very important, no. So I advise them, no, yung magdala talaga ng tubig, no. Tapos yung mga medication sila talagang i-take nila regularly. And then kung nagkakameron ng mga changes, no, may mga bagong symptoms, no, ina-advise ko sila talaga mag-follow up na para ma-check sila kung may mga kailangan pang gawin or additional advice.
And that's a wrap for this week's Weather HQ. Don't miss us next week right here on BNC, the Bilyonaryo News Channel. I'm Paolo del Rosario. Have a great weekend.